Okay, fantastic. So Gregory, good morning, and thank you so much for being here again. Um,
For
I
having
yes, last conversation was amazing, and pardon me, they're fixing my roof, so you will be hearing some sounds. That's the opportunity knocking on our door.
sounds from
Um,
above are good. Yeah.
what's that?
Sounds from above are good.
Yeah, exactly. They're finishing up, so um so I'd like to continue our conversation from last time, which is you're talking about your life of beginning as a carpenter and then how you switched it to becoming a master healer through healing your wife, through the journey of exploring how to heal your wife. And I know there are other people in your life, and I would love to continue that sequence, kind of mm, telling the story part by part, and then unveiling the questions that come up, because there's always a lot of questions when you speak. And I know we stopped at you were talking about how you started to travel and how you got into that, and you spoke about what I, I don't remember if you spoke about it to me personally or you said it in a video, but I would love you to go back there. um how did you decide to go to go look for the healing for your wife? Like you said, you didn't give up. Yeah.
For sure. Well, it was I had seen some things, as I mentioned, I came up in the carpentry trades, and that led me to a life of we were like redneck contractors, we were rough and gruff, and that was the macho image that I went into. Okay, it was what I chose, that I realize now. But then I just realized that's the way it was. I thought this is how you're supposed to be. And of course, that helped me to fit into the genre called general contractor. So I was a carpenter, and then I worked my way up as a subcontractor, then as a contractor. And during those times, I remember I had, when I became a carpenter, there were some investors they wanted to help. So sometimes I would take partners to build a house, things of this nature. And one of them was into transcendental meditation. And he used to say how he was floating around the room and he would just see things, and I would just laugh and drink another beer. And it was, I just could not go there. If I couldn't touch it or feel it or put it in the wall, it just didn't exist. It was, things had to be very uh, tangible for me in order for me to accept it. So because of that too, I wasn't the kind of person that went into investing in commodities and things, because it wasn't a world that I could feel, see, taste, or touch. I just wasn't in touch with it. So I didn't do that. I did my investing, if you will, in building homes. So I was very pragmatic about that. It was, you buy a two by four, you put it in the wall.
And I find that that's like very relatable, because a lot of people were taught that, like, unless you can touch or see it, we were taught to express our physical senses, but not, there's like everything else is not real unless you can see it.
Well, it was a good lesson too, because now even it's the things that we can't touch, feel, or taste, for example, that are quite real. For example, our thoughts, so it's a whole nother spectrum, which the carpentry part of it allowed me to stay grounded, so that when I did go off on these, when I began to meditate, things of this nature, and I was pretty fortunate. I would meditate, and instantly I would go away. My mind would just be quiet, and I was very fortunate like that. I remember the very first meditation I did. All I saw, what I thought was, oh, I just saw everybody saying, oh, I saw this cute thing, and all these visions, and they were explaining things and how they were floating in the air and all these. And I said, oh, gee, all I saw was white light. And come to find out, some people meditate for years just to see white light. What you would
How
mean?
did you get into it? Like, what you mean? Because I'd love to hear the transition. You went to the class, or what made you go to the meditation?
Sure. So what got me into the class in the first place, and I touched on this last time, was I had gotten to a point I was building homes. Things was very nice. I had way too many cars and trucks and things. I bought a lot of toys. I was spending my earnings very rapidly. I was living in kind of a, I would call it a thoughtless place right now, but it seemed normal then. Okay. Because I had been trained by Madison Avenue to, you earn money and you spend it. you buy better, faster, stronger clothes, and Madison Avenue, teaches us how to dress, how to talk, how to smell, how to act, and of course you have to pay for that. And so I was on that train, if you will. So then what happened was my wife became very ill. And right at that time, the market crashed in the area, and I had several homes that I had built on speculation, which means I built them in anticipation to sell. And the banks were shutting down. Nobody could get loans, so we couldn't. We had a difficulty selling those houses. I was poised to really move ahead in the economic world. Instead, I moved directly the opposite direction. During that time, my wife became ill. She had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. Now, as I mentioned before, they had told us we couldn't have children. She was told she couldn't have children. Oh, well, we have 2 children. I have 4 grandchildren now. So I wasn't very keen to believe what the doctor said. Plus, optimistically, I certainly didn't want to lose her. So it just went about. I thought, well, I'm going to have to find people outside the hospital area, outside of allopathic medicine, because they basically sent her home to die. They told her she had about 2 weeks to live after this operation. She actually went 11 years. Now, perhaps, well, in the larger scheme of things, I can see why that happened, but I'll have to insert that later. What happened was I started looking into things like transcendental meditation. I went to the New Age bookstores to see what I could find. And I happened upon this book from a guru, and it was about a guru or an avatar. He was a grand being in India. And I told one of my friends about it. And I said, boy, this man was known to heal people. He's doing everything that Jesus had done. And I thought, I've got to go see him. And my friend, being somebody who really steps into action, said the next day, he said, well, I got our tickets, we're going to go. And it happened that quickly. And so we went to India. I missed a whole part of the story. Let me back up just a minute. One of the things I've learned through
Me too, because I'm like having goosebumps of the moment.
there was a part of my story where we had been into it. I do have trouble sometimes telling this because it brings up a lot of emotion, of course, but there was a point in time when she had come home, and it was a very difficult time. She was very ill. So I'd come home to helping her cleaning up messes. She was throwing up a lot. She was on chemotherapy and radiation.
This was before going to India.
This was before, yeah. So I almost skipped
How
this.
long that was into like sickness? How many?
This was about 2 years that was going on. And I kept thinking, well, things will get better. Every week past 2 weeks was a win as far as I was concerned. And but things were getting very difficult. And because it was a tumor in the brain, they had told me that it may change her. She might experience some change in personality.
Well, I'm just like, sorry, I'm interrupting you a little bit because I'm trying to connect the. So you said it was 2 weeks, and then there's 2 years that you're talking about 2 years.
Yes.
So what kept her going? You think that was like you did something that together, or you did something? What kept her going?
I would like to think. I think it was more divine intervention here. And as you hear the end of the story, I think it becomes very clear, because at the end of the show here, I went from this redneck contractor to intuitive healer, and that I think was the real purpose of this entire happening. So 2 years into it, she literally filed divorce papers, and we actually got divorced. And I thought, well, again, I was very optimistic, and I thought, it's the sickness talking. I'll just keep looking, I'll keep looking. And I did self-medicate for a while, and with alcohol and a lot of cigarettes, things like that. I didn't actually realize it, but I was checking out. I mean, I could barely function. And so that didn't help much with the market crashing. So things got really difficult. I wound up living in a basement of one of my subcontractors. I mean, I had lost everything. And so it was something. And one of my neighbors, she was very cordial and nice and very beautiful. And I was very lonely. And I thought, well, she's paying attention to me. This is going to be something good, and that's what I was thinking. My mind was sick, and I was thinking sick things. But she noticed when I first came, I was still rather happy, and I was trying to get things together. And then she saw I declined very rapidly. And so she put me on to a group called LifeSpring, which was a self-awareness group. And I kept telling her I'd go and go, and I wouldn't. And finally, she came all dressed up to the door, and she said, "Come on, I'm taking you to a party." She tricked me. And thank God she did. And I went to that meeting, and I remember thinking, what a great place to be. Now, I'd been alone for a while. I really didn't know what was going on. I was heading in a deep depression. I didn't even remember I had a family. And I have a lovely, beautiful family. A lot of family members. We're all very close. I didn't even think to reach out to them. I mean, that's how depression does crazy things to your mind. All I was interested in was in
How
bringing.
old were you at that moment?
Oh, this was in my early 30s. Okay,
Uh-huh.
this was around that time. Actually, late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, right in there. It's funny. It's difficult for me to
She got
pinpoint.
sick when you were in your 20s, late 20s. This was like very early in your life. Very
Yeah.
early.
Yes, yes. The children were very young, and we'd had the two children after they told us we couldn't. So it was.
Eh, So how old were you approximately when you found out that she's sick?
I think it was. My son would tell me probably, but I would say about 25, 26, right in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. That's very early. Like very
Yes,
early.
yes,
And
yes.
you had children after she was
Oh, it was
discovered.
prior to her getting the
Okay.
diagnosis. Yeah.
Ah, amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I always, when I tell this story, there's so much that when I tell it, it comes out a little different each time because I remember something different, that, or at least I could say my perception of what happened has changed. Okay. But so I went to that course, and I thought, what a great place to be. There's all these people around, they're having fun, there's joy, and I hadn't experienced that in a long time. Now, from a person whose nickname was Laughing Boy in our family, and they had two names for me, Golden Boy and Laughing Boy, and because I would just be happy no matter what was going on. Family members were in dissension, and I would be making jokes, and bringing everybody back to joy. And it was something I just was naturally doing. And a great deal of my family was like that too. So it was easy to fall into. So I went to this course, and I had been so sad, so dejected, and just I'd really realized I had given up. And there was these beautiful people all around laughing and having fun, and I thought, how could they do this? Life's so terrible. I didn't even see that side of life for a while. And this wonderful woman got up on the stage, and I thought, wow, that's just like this goddess stepped up there. And she said something, and to this day, I don't know what it was. It touched me so deeply. Here I am, this macho contractor, and I started crying, and I couldn't stop. I was crying. I had, my stuff pouring out of my nose. I mean, I was just a mess. As fate would have it, there were two wonderful women on either side of me, and they I said something out loud. I said, anybody would be a fool not to take this course after this woman talked. And they had a money back guarantee. And I said, well, I'd lost everything. What are they going to do? Sue me when my check bounces, you know? and and so I thought, I can't lose, but I couldn't move. I was embarrassed to move because I was crying so much. I couldn't stop. And I remember each one took me by the arm and took me to the registration table, and I signed up. I saw my registration paper after the class. I couldn't even keep my signature on the line. I mean, I was in bad shape. I wrote, scribbled down across the page. You know, I couldn't even write. And I had to wait like 3 weeks before the course started. In that 3 weeks, I thought, well, you know, I ought to try to make some money and get this thing put back together. And I was, well, this was a tough time. I remember one of my subcontractors called and said he wanted me to help him do a bid because he was very sick. And he said, would you go? And it was like a $3,000 or $4,000 job. So I said, sure, I'll go and look at it for you. And the first time I attempted to do that, I wound up at a restaurant that I had remodeled 8 times in 9 years. We took it from a 500 square foot restaurant. Now it was like 3,600 square foot. We kept adding on to it. He'd sell more pizzas. We'd add on, you know. We turned it into a pretty good sized restaurant. But at the end of our work last time, I didn't finish things because that was when everything fell apart. And so we ended kind of badly. But we'd become good friends. Well, I went to put this bid together and I drove the exact opposite direction of where I was supposed to go. And I wound up at that restaurant. And here I am in the parking lot of the restaurant, and I lost it again. I just started crying. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I wound up there, and I thought, well, I'm here. I might as well go in and say hello. His name was Mr. Romano. It was an Italian restaurant. And we'd become very good friends. You know, I remodeled his restaurant, remodeled his houses. We'd done a lot of things together. And I walked in and he goes, Greg, how are you? And I said, well, I'm okay. And he goes, I got something for you. See, he never paid me my last payment because he was mad at me. And he had saved it under the cash register. And he pulled out the envelope and he paid me. And I had enough for the class. I had enough for the rent. I had enough for expenses. I mean, almost to the penny. It was just extraordinary. And I thought, well, life's changing pretty rapidly here. This is a good thing. It's a good sign. So I went back and I actually put the money in the bank, you know, and I made the check so it would work. After that happened, I went then to do that bid for that subcontractor. And I turned it into a little over $300,000, very large remodeling job. It was supposed to be just a little $5,000 retaining job. But I was so afraid to take the contract. You know, I was doing this for my subcontractor. He was also a contractor too. And I brought back the contract to him. I said, well, here you go. And he looked at it and he said, what did you do? And I said, well, you can do all these things. And I just made a little bigger project for you. And he said, you take it. He said, you did it. This is your work. He said, you have the contract. I wouldn't take it. Everything, it seemed, you know, I'd lost my business. I'd lost my wife, as my mind was thinking. And I thought everything I'm touching, it goes away. So I don't want to do this. I said, you take the contract and I'll work for you as a subcontractor. And that's how we did it. He paid me very well, of course, but that started me back on the road again, at least to getting back into my life. And that was how things started to change around.
This is amazing. I'm like, oh, the goosebumps don't stop. They just keep coming. And because, wow, what a
This isn't the road that, you know, people ask a lot of people how they got into their spiritual journey, and a lot of it was pain, misery, and despair. Now, I don't recommend that. You don't have to do this to get the ball rolling.
Now you don't. Now you don't. I feel like people who are living in this age, they're in luck, especially like 2023, the 2020s. We are at the speed where we don't have to suffer anymore. We can grow spiritually and expand, and
Yes.
kids are learning their superpowers.
Yes, I mean, that was the biggest thing. So I went to that course. Then things started to come back together, and I thought, well, I'm going to find ways to get things done. And that's when I announced, I started to go to the bookstores and the spiritual places,
How
because
many days was the course? What was the, or
believe it
was
or
it?
not, it was only 5 days. It
It
was
sounds
three, and it
like
wasn't
very short.
even, yeah, it was like Thursday night, Friday night, then all day Saturday and Sunday, and it was over.
Because I did something like that in New York City, that called Landmark Forum,
Yes.
which, which was very, life-changing experience for me. And that sounds like it was 3 days and a Tuesday night. So they did it
Yes.
something.
Yeah,
Sounds like,
I can tell you a good story about all of those courses, because it turned out I took the advanced course after that. Then I took another, what they call a leadership course, and that was 3 months. And what you did is you confronted your life through enrollment was their motive. So we actually would build the next courses, but in order to build the next courses, we had to straighten out our lives, okay, with the tools that we had just learned in the courses.
it's really sounds like what I went through. LifeSpring is, but it might be like a similar system to like a sister system to where I was studying. This is interesting because
Well, you're right on, believe it or not. You're exactly right on. I'll tell you what happened.
okay, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was staffing a lot of the courses. I was working with the facilitators, and you can go and get a job to staff. So you're one of the people that helps everybody when they come in to take these courses. And one of the people told me, they said, well, Alexander Everett is coming into town. I said, well, who's he? They go, well, he's the fellow that designed these courses. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he's the father of this new age movement. And they say, he's coming to Denver. And I said, he is. I said, well, I'll drop everything and go see him, And so I did. And the night before I went to see him, I had a dream that I bumped right into him. And I thought, well, because I was late in the dream. And so I said, well, I'll go there early. And I got there early. I sat right in the front row, because that's where all the energy is. And then I had to go to the bathroom. So I left to go to the bathroom, and I came out, and I was late. They were shutting the doors to the seminar. So I ran around the corner and I smacked right into him. And he said, young man, he looked down at me. He was about 6'4" or so. And he grabbed both my hands and looked straight through me. I mean, he was looking right in. I mean, I could feel my heart beating when he looked at me, and he said, young man, said, you need to stop whatever it is you're doing and get on with your healing gifts. And I said, I thought he was kind of off his rocker. I don't have any healing gifts. I'm a carpenter. And so I went in and I just floated through that class. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever been through. And I thought, I've felt myself coming home again. I was feeling happy and fun, connected, and I had the deepest kind of. He did a lot of guided visualizations and a lot of meditations, which I teach a lot of those now. He had a philosophy. He said, take whatever I've taught you, use it verbatim, make it your own. I don't care. These things have been said over thousands of years. I don't copyright anything. And he won me over with that one statement. It's like he's not trying to take this and hide it. He's wanting people to get this and go forward in life. And I thought, that's a good model. I'm going to do that too. It was then that I now found my way to India. As I told some of my friends, I was ready to hear those kind of teachings. I couldn't hear them before because they weren't 2x4s and plywoods and things like that. So, but now I could hear it. I could see that there was a whole nother world that was available to us that I'd never thought about before. And so I did. As I mentioned, I told one of my friends, he bought the tickets immediately, and we went to India.
Can you tell the name of the friend, or is it secret? That's okay.
Sure, he was a good friend of mine. He's a very good chiropractor in upstate New York, Dr. Stephen Wexler. And that's a whole nother story how we got to be friends, because it was part of that journey that I wouldn't believe those things at first. And somebody introduced us, and I thought, well, I'll go visit the quack, and see. I
It's
thought we became really good friends.
friend, because the friend that buys you a ticket next day and says we're going, that's the best friend to have around, huh?
Sure. I mean, we'd only known each other a very short period of time when that happened. And of course, I did at the time, I couldn't afford the whole thing, so he just did it. And then eventually, I made an arrangement. We took care of that, but I couldn't have done it if he hadn't, put the whole thing together. And I even took my children. They were 11 and 12 now years old, so they came with us. And
Now
that was,
your daughter is older, right? Your older daughter.
now
Yeah,
she's the older one, and my son was the younger one. And he wanted to stay there. We went to Sai Baba's ashram. We spent a month on that ashram. And we didn't, people said, well, did you go see the Taj Mahal? Did you see this building? No, we didn't go to see buildings. We went there to find out who we were, to get into our hearts, to really understand our gifts so that we could bring them back to the world. It's one of the things, again, I was blessed. Many gurus, many beings, they just want to collect your money and take you through a little process. I mean, we could live there for about 25 cents a day. It was just kind of simple. And it was a beautiful time, because this particular guru, it was Sri Satya Sai Baba. A good guru doesn't tell you what to do. A good teacher doesn't tell you what to do. They simply open the door. You've got to go through. You've got to choose to go through. For a great example of that was, it was time for us to get ready to leave. And
now I'm gonna stop you just for a second again, because I love Sai Baba and I know who he is, even though I don't know much about him. Somehow I felt his presence, and got to be initiated in certain energies. And the energy of the kindness and pure love is like, and laughter, amazing. But for people who don't know who Sai Baba is, would you tell a little bit, like, what did you learn about him and what do you know
oh,
about him?
it was amazing. He was, when he was younger, he realized who he was. He was he was like a Jesus born again, if you will. He knew who he was. He went through some very, very beautiful teachings, as Jesus did, and he could perform the same kinds of miracles that Jesus did. He would heal people. He would even, I mean, I witnessed this firsthand while we were there. It was just amazing. When you mentioned the love that pours from this man, I mean, it just brought tears to my eyes. And again, I'm a macho twit contractor still, and I would get around him and people would say, oh, they just started crying. And I said, oh, that's baloney, and it happened to me. He would do things, he called him his calling card. He would just, there was a substance he makes called vibhuti, and it's an ash that is like the ashes of the phoenix. It's a very healing material. And he would just put his hand up and a little cloud would form and it would just pour out. Now people would say, oh, he's got a tube from his arm, but he had short sleeve shirts, and there's not a shirt, but a big smock he wore there, usually orange when I was there. And he would have a ceremony where he would fill up this 3-foot diameter and about 4-foot high urn with this vibhuti. And he would just be talking and filling it up and filling it up. And as it turned out, one time we were able to sit, there was a big mandir, and we would wait in lines outside this mandir, outside this wall. Inside the wall was a large space where everybody would go in and sit, and there was another building in the middle that he would come out of. And he would come out, and we would go in there, and there would be thousands of people in there. And so we were very lucky. We got usually to sit in the first, second, third, or fourth rows. When we're sitting in the concrete in 120-degree weather, it was just, but we managed it somehow. And he would come out, and to some people, which one day we were very fortunate, my son and I were sitting right in the front row, and he came up to my son and he kept motioning him to do something. We didn't know what he was saying because he spoke Hindu, you know. And so somebody showed us to put our hands out like this, and my son did, and he filled his hands up with the vibhuti. And we watched it happen, right? You know, we're looking right up at his hands, so we could see what was happening, and filled his hand. I still have some of that. It's when I feel I could use a little boost, you know. You'd
Don't
put
tell anybody.
yeah, I would, and you would take wet your finger a little, put a little dot on your forehead, you know, so your third eye of perception, that would help you to come back home, to see things, to see truth is basically what it is. So we don't get this distorted view of things from our past beliefs about things, instead of they interfere with us seeing the truth. So to take this vibhuti was to help you to see the truth. And some people would put it in a little bit of water and drink it. Just however you want to use it was fine. It smelled like it was just such a beautiful fragrance about it. I can't even describe it. It's like a fruity kind of a beautiful smell, and it wasn't like ashes, you know. It had this nice fragrance to it. He did several things like that. When you see something like this, it changes you. That something happens. You're in a different club, if you will, because he, one of the people that was with us, actually, she was good friends with some of the friends that we also met there, and they know her very well. We got to know her well. We would have our lunches and dinners together and things. And she was in a wheelchair, and she'd come there to die. Her spine was nearly gone. It was completely degenerated, and she couldn't hardly move at all. And she was this lovely lady. She just had so many beautiful things to say. And she was a Sai Baba, what they call a devotee, where she really spent her life studying and worshiping and being around him. And the thing is, when we go into this mandir, he would nod at certain people and they would go in and get a healing. And if he nods at you, you can get up. And we didn't know this. We all wore a little kerchief around our necks, like a color, because we all had to be dressed in white from our ankles down to our wrists, up to our wrists. Because the idea was, you're not trying to look at somebody wearing fancy clothes. You're there to look at yourself. So we were in this sea of white, you know, and it was kind of amazing. And long and short, he nodded at her. So her husband, you know, got to go with her. We could have gone in with them, but we didn't know that because we were all as a group, you know. And so we watched them go in. They picked her wheelchair up, carried it up a couple of stairs, and put her into this building. She could barely move. She even had that kind of odor around people who are dying. I mean, she was on her way out. I watched her run out of there. I watched her. She literally walked at a fast pace and just literally and jumped up and down when she came out before she came down the steps. And we are all, I mean, this thing about crying, I mean, it just can't help it. There was so much joy. And her husband came out and he was just like a proud peacock. He was just so happy. He had told her, I said, well, we went to lunch afterward, or went to eat afterwards, and we have to.
I'm gonna stop you right there. Stop that thought, because I'd like to complete this session of the video, and we will continue recording, but just so people would see this episode and digest it, and then the rest will continue for the next episode.
Okay.
And, I just wanted to thank you for being here again for this marvelous story. I'm just so I'm like in this experience, living it with you, and it's such a joy and honor and excitement. It's like watching a movie through your words, you know, of amazing master healer who you are, really. And thank you very much for sharing your stories, and let's continue at our next episode.
Sure. I think I'll tell one thing before I go. I realized why I was crying, because I then knew in my heart that people like my wife could heal. And that's what caused my tears. I thought, wow, I have just seen what I came here for. And it was just so extraordinary. So then we'll pick it up from there.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's amazing. Really. It's like that's where you got your vision and your what you're looking for, that it's possible.
Yes, when you set your mind to get something done, it really makes a difference. It gets done. That's all
Yeah.
there is to it. That's something that we'll talk about more because that's the crux of healing. It's like you set your mind, you get clear, and you make a proclamation and things start to happen. This is a whole different world than putting a 2x4 on the wall. It's
First, there was a word, right? First,
yeah,
you say this is how it's gonna go, and then you search for it. That seems like your truth. That's how you're searching for it.
yes, yes. All right then, shall we end this now then, I suppose, yeah?
Thank you, everyone. I will see you at our next session.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Alicia.